All right, let's jump right in. Picture this. It's 2018, and Ghana is about to roll out a huge change to its schools, something that, on paper, looked like a really progressive step forward. But instead, it set off a massive national firestorm. We're going to get into this whole fascinating, really complex story about culture, fear, and the huge question of how you educate the next generation. And really, this is the core puzzle we're looking at today. You'd think it's a pretty straightforward problem with an obvious solution, wouldn't you? Well, the reality was not so simple. So the big question is, how on earth did a policy meant to tackle a major public health crisis get completely shut down? Let's dig in. Okay, so first things first. It all started with a plan. And this wasn't just a small tweak. It was a big, ambitious idea to totally change how young people in Ghana learn about their bodies and relationships. So what was this plan exactly? Well, it was called Comprehensive Sexuality Education. You'll see it called CSE for short. The whole idea, at least from the perspective of its supporters, was to go way beyond just the old school biology and just say no approach. They wanted to give students the full picture, covering everything from reproductive health to what consent actually means to understanding their rights. Now, the rollout, to say it wasn't smooth would be a massive understatement. The timeline here is just wild. The curriculum gets announced, and almost overnight, this huge wave of public backlash just explodes. We're talking weeks, not months. And within weeks, the Ministry of Education, who was behind the plan to begin with, completely slammed on the brakes. They shelved it indefinitely. And just like that, poof, it was gone. So you've got to be asking, what just happened there? Who was behind this incredibly powerful backlash? And what exactly were they so upset about? Well, this leads us to the surprising alliance that came together to fight CSE. And to really get a grip on the opposition, you first have to understand the social landscape in Ghana. Religion plays an absolutely huge role in day-to-day life. I mean, you've got more than 90% of the population identifying as either Christian or Muslim. So naturally, these religious groups have a ton of influence on pretty much everything, including social and political debates. And they really, really did not hold back. This quote here from the Christian Council of Ghana, it gets right to the heart of their biggest fear. For them, this wasn't just some disagreement over a school subject. No, they saw CSE as a kind of subtle agenda designed to completely reshape societal values, especially when it came to LGBT issues. That was the core of it. But here's the thing, it wasn't just religious leaders. The resistance also came from inside the education system. This quote is from a local secretary of GNA, the Ghana National Association of Teachers. And their fears sounded a lot like the religious groups, didn't they? They were worried about gender identity and what they saw as a real danger to the very fabric of their society. So you see, what we have here is this incredible disconnect. It's like two totally different conversations happening at once. On one side, you've got the official goals of CSE, empowering kids with knowledge, teaching safety, and trying to lower teen pregnancy rates. But on the other side, you have these powerful, deeply held fears from opponents who saw it as a tool to indoctrinate children, promote homosexuality, and corrupt Ghanaian values. It was this huge chasm, and the policy just fell right into it. Now, just because the policy got shelved, it doesn't mean the debate just vanished. Not at all. While all these arguments were raging in the public sphere, real life, of course, just kept going. So what were the actual on-the-ground consequences of this decision? And the numbers, they're pretty sobering. 13,444. Just let that sink in. That's how many pregnancies were recorded in just a 4-year span among girls aged 10 to 14. This isn't just a number on a chart, right? This is a serious crisis, and it's exactly the kind of thing that CSE was supposed to help address. Which, of course, brings us to a really important question. If young people aren't learning about this stuff in a formal, structured classroom, where are they getting their information? Because they're curious. That information gap is gonna get filled one way or another. And for a lot of them, this is the answer. Think about it. Ghana has something like 15 million smartphones out there. And with all that access comes, well, a lot of exposure. A survey back in 2018 found that 2 out of every 5 kids between 12 and 17 had seen pornography. So with no formal education in place, the internet has basically become the default and completely unregulated sex ed teacher. And look, this isn't just abstract data. This is what people are actually experiencing. You can hear it in these quotes. Nana Kofi, a banker, says that for most young people, their very first introduction to sex comes from porn or just stories they hear from friends. And Rexes, who's in marketing, puts it so simply. Kids are being exposed to a lot of things, so we need to teach them before they learn from the wrong people. It's pretty straightforward. So even though the policy got put on ice, this whole conversation is far, far from over. The people who support CSE are still out there. They're still making their case, and they're arguing that, look, the need for this is actually bigger now than it's ever been. And what's their argument? Well, supporters point to a ton of research that seems to directly contradict the fears of the opposition. Studies from around the world show that this kind of education actually tends to make young people wait longer before having sex. It also leads to more people using contraception, it helps kids feel empowered to report abuse, and yeah, it reduces unintended pregnancies and STIs. The data is pretty clear on this. There's a Ghanaian sex educator, Ami Shika, who puts the choice in really stark terms. She basically argues that the question isn't if kids are going to learn about sex. They are. The real question is how they're going to learn. Are we going to intentionally teach them accurate, age-appropriate things? Or are we just going to leave them to piece it together on their own from whatever they find online or hear from friends?
And she actually ends with this really hopeful vision. Shika's promise is that if Ghana commits to doing this and doing it properly, then in 5 or 10 years, the results will be something the whole country can be proud of. Healthier, safer, more empowered kids. It's a powerful call to look past the firestorm of the moment and think about the long game.
Which really leaves us with this huge final question. Because this story, it isn't just about Ghana, right? And it's not even just about sex ed. It's about a challenge that pretty much every society on Earth is grappling with. How do you balance deeply held values and traditions with the very real, ever-changing needs of the next generation? There's no simple answer, of course, but it is a conversation that absolutely has to keep going.